I'm Chris Stafford, and this is AART the Podcast, where we meet the women behind their art.
If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll show you what I mean. If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll bring you to your knees. If you follow me.
My guest this week is American landscape painter Erin Spencer. Finding poetry in the landscape is how Erin portrays her work as she connects with nature. Born in Northern California, the second of 7 children, Erin moved to Maryland as a toddler. She showed an early interest in writing, dancing, and archaeology, and would later study archaeology and history at Brigham Young University in Utah. Her father, Boyd, was a chemistry professor as well as a pianist and composer, and her mother, Janine, a teacher who encouraged all her children to be creative. In her 20s, Erin spent 18 months in the Netherlands as a church missionary, where she took photographs which provided her with the inspiration for her early paintings. After returning to the US, Erin married her husband, Peter, and in 2008, the couple moved to Rhode Island, where they've raised 3 children. Faith and family are the most important aspects of Erin's life. She reads her scriptures daily and spends time each day at the easel. Her inspiration for her landscapes comes from California to New England via Europe, and she captures her scenes in plein air or in the studio. She says, "I think what's so exciting about the art, what I produce, but also art that I get to see from others, not just paintings, but anything that people create. It's an exciting thing to see." Erin also spends time studying art and teaching workshops. Her paintings are included in private collections across the US and around the world, including Canada, Europe, Israel, Australia, and Japan. She says, "My personal process begins with observation and study of the natural world in all its splendid variation. Whether working from life or from sketches back in my studio, my paintings become translations of what I perceive. The beauty of this is that I will always have work to do, poems to create from my personal impressions of the world." Erin, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Chris. This is great.
You're a paint-a-day girl, aren't you? It's really part of your daily routine to paint.
It is. Yeah, I definitely get in my studio just about every day.
And do you ever finish something in a day, or do you just make yourself disciplined to do something every day?
It depends. It varies from day to day, but there are many days where I definitely finish pieces because I do a lot of plein air paintings. Those tend to be smaller, so it's something that I'm able to finish off in one session, a lot of those kinds of paintings, but larger pieces, obviously, I'll come in and work on them, throughout that process, which can take, I don't know, sometimes weeks, depending on the problems that I run into or just the layers that I want to build up on it, or how bored I am with the painting at the time. Whatever my interest is kind of what I end up working on at the time, unless I've got deadlines. So, yeah.
Now, you live in Rhode Island. Describe, if you would, with your artist's eye, what your studio environment looks like and the light and what inspires you each day when you get up. If it's a cloudy day, does that mean you're just going to go in the studio? And does it depend on the light on the time of day? Paint us a picture, Erin.
Yeah, so Rhode Island is beautiful. New England is just very beautiful. It's very green and lush. We live in a part of Rhode Island, well, all of Rhode Island is really close to the water. So we have the Narragansett Bay that kind of cuts up in the middle of the state. And so almost anywhere you would live in Rhode Island, there's going to be water nearby. So that's a pretty prominent theme in my work, being so close to the water. I guess day to day, though, it really just depends on what I have going in my studio at the time. My studio doesn't have amazing light. I just work out of a small studio that's carved out of an extra bedroom in our house. So it's not, there's nothing special about it, I guess, in that regard, but it's my own space, blocked off from everything else and very messy and evident that I'm in here all the time. Um, but yeah, day to day, I don't necessarily get out and paint every day outside. If it's nice weather, I'll be more excited to get out and do that if I have time to do it. Clouds are a huge inspiration for me. So if there are gorgeous clouds, that will be more motivational for me in a lot of ways to get out and do that. I mean, I think it really just depends on what I have going on at the time. If I've got shows that I'm preparing for, or if often I work in series. So I'll have, a series of paintings that I'm kind of trying to put together. And so that'll, motivate me one way or another to get in the studio and get to work.
You have a family, you have a husband, Peter, and 3 children. That must frame your day, I would imagine.
It does, yeah. So we have a busy house. Our children range from high school down to elementary school. So it's a lot of the morning routine, obviously, is full of that, of getting them out the door. And even my day to day here at the house, I work from home, but I would say that I'm not in my studio right away every morning after they leave getting to work. I have some study time that I keep aside for myself each day, and I go walking most days as well. And then obviously there's just the run of the mill things, running errands, maybe grocery shopping sometimes, or things like that. So I am not a very routine oriented person generally, and I never really have been. So I tend to get things done as I realize they need to get done. Not always in the most efficient manner, but I do things pretty quickly. So, I can get things done fast if I need to. And then I will find a way to get into my studio. Sometimes I get right into painting. Sometimes I have other projects that need to be finished, framing a show, or I kind of bounce around, I guess, a lot in my studio and in my work. And somehow it all gets done in the end. I don't know. I don't have a good system for it. I don't have a good routine for it, but I think I do work well with a deadline. So that gets me motivated, I guess, when it gets right down to it. But I don't know. I'm just kind of I've always got ideas floating around in my head of what I want to be making and what I want to be painting. I keep a sketchbook. And so that's something that I feel like has been a really useful tool for me, I guess, because of the way that I am not very routine based and my life is very hectic in a lot of ways, just with extracurriculars with our family and other commitments and trying to keep the home rolling, and that kind of thing. And I like our home to be a happy place. Like I want it to be full of friends and my kids' friends. And so we have kind of a revolving door around here as well. So there's a lot of kids in our house each day after school, and lots of people to feed and lots of things to do. But my studio is right in our house. And so I'm in and out of my studio, even when there's a lot of people in the house doing things. The kids are entertained doing what they do, running around outside or whatever. And I just slip in here and, get to work on things here and there. And I always have been that way with my work, working in little pockets of time. It isn't the best way to work, even for the way that my brain is. I need a lot of time to process and accomplish tasks. And so it can be tricky sometimes. There's times where it gets to be pretty overwhelming and I have to make lists and, organize my time and my thoughts. But I don't know, that might give a little bit of an impression of the chaotic nature of my mind, the chaotic nature of my studio, the chaotic nature of my life. Somehow it all gets funneled in all together and somehow something pops out at the end. Hopefully it's good stuff.
Well, you told me how much you love the process of it all.
Yeah.
In terms of that process, then I'm also curious, when I get to know my guests, of how the person behind the artist and the kind of personality, how would you describe yourself if you had to?
Well, I feel like I am a person who enjoys a lot of solitude, which seems really counterintuitive to all that I just said in terms of our house and our home on a daily basis. But I guess in a lot of ways, because of the nature of our lives at this stage of my life, at least, I think my studio tends to be like a refuge for me. It feels like a sacred space, where like I can bring my ideas and they can kind of have a place to be incubated, and I can nurture those different ideas that I might have, in terms of paintings that I want to create, or just the creative process itself. Like, I tend to, I do my landscape paintings, but I do enjoy a lot of other outlets for my creativity as well. And I think for me, those different outlets for my creativity are a refuge and a place for me to still my mind a little bit and kind of connect with the inner workings, I guess, of my own heart, my own thoughts and ideas, the way that I perceive the world. I tend to process things internally. I've always been an introspective kid. I just kind of have always been that way, and have sought a lot of solitude in my life to think and process. And so I think that being an artist allows me a lot more opportunities to do that, to find ways to process and be alone with my thoughts, I guess. And alone, I mean, being an artist is inherently quite solitary. And I enjoy that aspect of it. I think it's really good for me. So,
Well, you mentioned there that you were an introvert as a child.
mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the little girl, Erin, the little girl, when you were growing up. What was life like for you? Were you the little girl that always sketched and drew in books and on anything that she could find?
I loved being creative. I think childhood is inherently creative, because we're discovering the world and our own place in it. So I think there's just so much that we're learning about ourselves as kids. And so without really even knowing that that's what we're doing. For me as a kid, I come from a big family. There's 7 kids in my family, and I'm number 2. And so our home was always a busy place. It was a happy place. But obviously there's a lot of stuff going on all the time. And I would find myself kind of escaping out of that a lot of the time. I would spend a lot of time outside. I would spend a lot of time walking around my little street, where I lived, up and down the street. I would walk along the curb. I remember walking on the curb and just looking down at my shoes and just thinking. I would talk out loud to myself sometimes. I wouldn't say that. I would say that, yes, I had a lot of access to art and making things. My mom was very interested in having us be creative. So we each had, I remember when we were really little, we each had a little box in a cupboard that we could pull out, and it had our name on it. And it had all these little supplies in it, craft supplies, crayons, markers, things we could glue on paper, and she would just let us get that out whenever we wanted to and sit at the table and make things. I remember her doing activities like that with us a lot. And so I was always encouraged to be creative. We all were in our house. Music and art were a big part of our lives growing up, and writing. All of those things were really encouraged for all of us, all of my siblings and I. So I was around that artistic, those aspects of being artistic. But I wasn't particularly good at any of that. I wasn't necessarily the kind of kid that was always drawing, or any of that. I wasn't. And so as I got older, in high school, I took a couple of art classes, but that wasn't, and I liked it. I thought it was fun and interesting, but I didn't really get into any one particular medium or anything like that. I remember one time being pulled aside by an art teacher with a few other students to do like an extra class where we would do printmaking after school. And so I did that once, but I really wasn't focused on art, and I didn't think I wanted to be an artist or anything like that. I loved writing. I was a dancer, so I did ballet, and I kind of thought that's what I might want to do. And then as I got a little bit older, I actually really wanted to be an archaeologist. at the end of high school. That's kind of where I ended up. At the end of high school, I was really fascinated by history and old ancient artifacts and languages and people, culture, all of that was really interesting to me. And that's what I went into college thinking I wanted to pursue. So that's what I studied. I actually studied anthropology and some languages. I studied Arabic for a while in college. I wanted to move to Egypt at one point and be an archaeologist there and just dig in the dirt for the rest of my life. And yeah, those were my interests. And I actually took a little break during college to go on a mission for my church. And I ended up in the Netherlands speaking Dutch. So I learned Dutch and I just was really immersed in life there, getting to know the people of that country, spending a year and a half there, basically. When I came home from that, I finished up with college. And after college, I actually had this really circuitous route to art. So I ended up wanting to, I left school and I didn't necessarily have a great ambition anymore to be an archaeologist. My ideas had kind of shifted over the course of my college career and having been in the Netherlands, and just growing older, my perspective shifted a little bit. And I was just kind of searching, I guess, at this point for what I was really interested in. And I think this is really where I started to tap a little bit more into the creative side of myself. I started working at a plant nursery for minimum wage with my college degree. That's what I decided to do with that. But I loved it. And I worked there for about 2 years and I learned all about plants and how to grow things. And I thought that was wonderful. I loved working with my hands. I loved getting dirty. I loved the hard work of it. And then we adopted our first child around that time. And so I was married at this point and we went through that process of adoption. And so right around that same time, I had a good friend that had gone to art school and she was transitioning from teaching to trying to become full-time with her art. And she put on this open house. And I remember going over there with my husband. This is just before we adopted our son, and walking through and seeing her art and seeing the paint on the surface. And I walked out of there with my husband and I said, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to do. And the next day I went out and bought, my cheap oil paints and canvases and things like that from some craft store, sat down at our little fold out dining room table. We were just like poor newlyweds and started painting. I started painting pictures from my time that I had spent in the Netherlands and those landscapes of the big skies and the vast views, the big flat open land. And I started painting that. And I don't know. I mean, I can't say the rest is history because it was a long road from there, but that's really where it started for me, getting into art. And so it's a really, really random walk towards the art for me, but it's how I got here.
And college was Brigham Young University.
Yes. Yeah.
And just going back to your family, were there any artists in the family?
Yeah. So I have a few grandmothers. My father's mother, she did a lot of art in her older years as she got older. Well, I shouldn't say older. She wasn't that old, but so she started to paint, and we have a few of her paintings in my home where I grew up. My parents still live there. So that's lovely to see those. And then two of my great grandmothers actually were artists. And my great uncle was an artist. He didn't strictly do painting, but he was very artistic and was interested in a lot of art, and he did some painting as well. But yeah, so I mean, I feel like it's there. There's some of that thread in my family, and like I said, my father is a pianist, and that wasn't what he did for a career. He was actually a chemistry professor, but he's always played piano, and he's a composer, and so he would write music and record his music and things like that. And so we were always around a lot of that as kids too. So So yeah, I mean, the arts were a big part of my upbringing, I would say. I had always been taught to appreciate the arts and those creative endeavors, and music is a huge part of my life. It's still something that I don't know. I feel like it defines a lot for me. The music that I choose to listen to in my studio, the music that I kind of surround myself with can influence. I just feel like music is very influential on our mood and our thoughts and our ideas. And for me, it's a very enlarging thing for me. When I listen to certain music, it broadens my view of things and opens my eyes to things. So it's funny how music can be so impactful emotionally, but for me, it really is. So that's still always been really important to me. But yeah, so I guess to answer that, yeah, there's been art in my life and in my family that I've always seen.
And do you play any instruments?
I do. I played the flute in high school for a couple of years. So I started with violin. I learned a little bit of piano. And then I played the flute. So I still play the flute, not well, but I can still play. And then in college, I started playing guitar. So I play the guitar as well. And I love it all.
And you still play those instruments?
I do. Yeah.
And what did your mother do? Was she musical, or did she paint at all? Because she obviously encouraged all of you.
She did. So she plays the piano a little bit. I think she always wanted to play more. But like she was obviously, like I said, a busy mother of 7 children. And she felt it was very important to be home with us. And so her choice was to kind of utilize the talents and skills that she had. And she did a daycare out of our home all of my childhood. So we had 7 kids of our own that we had in our house, and she often had 6 or 7 children in daycare in our home as well. So we had a very full house. We had, throughout my childhood, we always had a large 15-passenger van. And my mom would take all of these kids, all of us, through the summer. She'd take us to the zoo. She'd take us to museums. She would take us to the park. I mean, she was a very ambitious, high energy, motivated person. She always had activities planned for people. She would take us on nature walks. So she was always encouraging of us to do all of these things, but she sacrificed a lot, I feel, in her own pursuits in order to facilitate a home like that for all of us, for me and my siblings, which I hope that can endeavor in my life to appreciate. She gave a lot of herself, I think, for us. So, yeah.
What are your parents' names?
Boyd and Janine.
And they live in Rhode Island?
No, they live in Maryland. So they were just up here this weekend visiting because our daughter got baptized in our church. And so they came up for that. But they just headed back yesterday. So yeah, they live in Maryland still, where I grew up. So
how did they react to you becoming a professional artist then?
They were excited about it. So at the time that I kind of chose to do this, and I guess I should say I never chose to become a professional artist. I don't think that was ever a conscious decision that I made. For me, when I got married, my husband was working full time and everything. And I feel like I've always kind of had the luxury to be a little more selective in what I would want to do. And so I felt a lot of freedom to choose different occupations throughout this time. I felt more freedom to find things that were interesting to me and exciting to me. I haven't really felt constrained by needing to provide 100% financially for myself and my family. So I think that is a gift, and not something that I think it's something that has made this possible for me in a little bit more of a nebulous way. I haven't necessarily had to have a plan from the onset. This is what I'm going to do. I have to have a plan. I have to know what's going to happen. So that's probably shaped a lot of how I have gone about my art career. But yeah, and so they've always been really supportive and really excited and proud of me. The first paintings that I ever sold were to my parents. And I remember when I first started trying to sell my work, I saw the first sale come through on it was on Etsy. That's where I first started selling my paintings back in like 2008, I believe. And I was so excited to see this sale come through. And then I looked and it was my mom. And I was like, oh, I mean, I wasn't disappointed, obviously, but I was like, oh, that's so sweet, you know. But yeah, so they've always been very supportive and wonderful about it. They've come out when I first came here, when we first moved to Rhode Island. So my husband and I, we were married and lived in Utah. And then we moved to Rhode Island in 2008. And when we were first here, I had put my painting stuff away a little bit after our son was born to kind of focus on that, get my bearings and really be there for him in those early months. And so I had put all of my paints away, and I hadn't even had a real studio where we were living. So it was just kind of putting them in a box basically and being done with that for a little while. And then we moved to Rhode Island, and for my husband to go to law school. That's what brought us out here. And when we were setting up our apartment, putting things out, I thought, I'm going to get this box out. I'm going to put my painting stuff out again. And I started painting again. And that's really, I think, where I felt like I became a little more ignited with this desire to really learn the skill and really pursue it as not just as a hobby and something that I thought was fun to paint from these photographs from the Netherlands, you know, and just kind of puttering around with it. I really started to focus a lot more on it. And so, but at that time, my parents, I remember, would drive up from Maryland and help me set up when I would do these street fair shows and just different things that I would do. They were so supportive and wonderful. So yeah, they've always been that way. They've been that way with all of my siblings, with any endeavor that they've set out to do. So I feel very fortunate.
So when your mother was taking you around to museums, were there any artists that caught your eye that inspired you? You would list among your favorites today, of the masters even, as well as contemporary artists?
You know, I don't think there was anything in my early childhood that I felt, I wasn't exposed to it in the sense of really knowing what I was looking at or who I was looking at or anything like that. I'm sure as a child, I liked colorful things. I liked pretty things. I liked that kind of stuff. But I wasn't pinpointing any particular artists. I'm sure a lot of people would say that they want to, like, the names that would come up for them are like Van Gogh and things like that. And for me, that's true as well. That I remember in art class at school, in elementary school, we had a month-long class on Van Gogh. I remember that for some reason, and seeing paintings that my teacher had put around the perimeter of this, like the wall of the classroom, and just being able to look at those. And I think for me, probably it was because the shocking story of him cutting his ear off. Because I remember hearing that as a child. I necessarily was drawn to him because of his art, but more so because it just stuck in my head. But no, there really isn't. I honestly I didn't take any art history in college. I didn't study art. I never really went to museums much in college. And so it wasn't until I became more interested in art for myself and making art that I became a little more exposed to art out in the world and art history. So when I was in the Netherlands and I came home from that trip that I lived there for a year and a half, I brought home very few souvenirs from my time there, just a handful of things. And one of the things that I brought home, though, was a print of a painting that I also still to this day don't know who painted it, but a Dutch artist. And it was two figures on a beach, but the landscape is just this very muted, beautiful, beautiful grays and blues of the ocean. And that struck me apparently as I was there as a young 21-year-old or whatever. And I brought that home with me. And then when I started painting for myself, I was painting from photographs of that same kind of landscape. And so I don't know, I think that my drive to create art didn't come really at all from seeing art or knowing that was something that people even could do. I didn't think of art as being something that you could really pursue as a career. I just really had no concept of that. And so I really just came to art because I loved paint. I loved the process and the textures the effects that you could get with it. And I loved the landscape and the skies. I was really drawn to all of those things. And so I just started kind of trying to paint those things myself. And then as I got further into that and started to see things differently in a new way and started to become more interested in design in a painting and how to really make something sing, I started to look a lot more at art. I looked at first, it was online, I would stumble on things online, whether it was contemporary artists or old masters. And just over time, it became more evident to me what I was drawn to and what I was inspired by. Even now, I feel like that's constantly changing as I learn about new artists. And so it's exciting to me. I think I've always, I guess, as I became more exposed to art, Russian Impressionism has always been something that has really pulled me in. The textures of their paint, their colors, the vibrancy in that work, even how they can acquire such a tonal quality with such thick paint and even saturated color at times. I just am fascinated by that, by their work. I like a lot of right now, I think art that I think stops me in my tracks the most is a lot of these British Impressionist painters, plein air painters that I follow on Instagram, and I see their work pop up, and I just want to stop and look at it. It's just the paint is very textured, and I love the spontaneity of it. And yeah, I don't know. So there's definitely phases that I go through with work that I'm looking at.
You mentioned that you obviously went to school for archaeology and history and not to art school per se. Would you describe yourself as self-taught, or are you teaching yourself through the studies that you do? You mentioned that you study almost daily.
Yeah.
What are you currently studying? And I know you like languages as well, so I wanted to hone in and see where the art studies were coming, because obviously you give workshops. Are you studying art now?
A little bit. So yeah, when I say I give myself some time to study each day, I read each day. I read my scriptures. I read from scripture. For me, that's something that's very grounding. My faith is a big part of my life. But I also, when I do get into my studio, the things that I'm looking at, I study artists. I have just the stack of books that's sitting here next to me. I have a big, thick book of Degas and his work. I have an artist named Richard Pikesley. He's a British artist. He has a book that I look at, it's just sitting here that I've looked at. A book on just Impressionism. I have an Andrew Wyeth book here. I'll look at the work. I'll sometimes do studies from, like master copy type things. I am trying to do daily figurative studies from, master copies and things like that. So just charcoal work at this point, not necessarily in paint, because that's an aspect of that's a subject matter that I haven't explored as extensively, obviously, as my landscapes, but that is something that's always intrigued me. So that's something that I feel like I'm kind of just doing quietly in my own time. I have always been a pretty prolific painter and have had a large output of work, because I'm fast, I guess. I think I paint rather quickly. And that's a wonderful thing. But I think what I am really interested in right now is slowing down a little bit and still painting, obviously, and still working and creating new bodies of work and things like that. But slowing down and also looking at my own personal practice and what I'm doing for myself and how I'm growing as an artist. Because I think sometimes as an artist, you can get into a place where you're just creating the output of work is really, it almost can start to feel like you're creating a product to sell rather than really, really going deeper and trying to master your craft. And for me, that's more important. I really love to be able to sell my work. I love when people inquire after my work or acquire my work and are interested in showing it, like if a gallery is interested in showing it, or when I hear feedback from people that are excited to see it or excited to purchase it, that is extremely fulfilling and very motivational as an artist to keep working and keep moving forward. But for me, I think that the study that I mentioned is so important for me because I never want my work to be the same. I want it to continue to change and evolve over time because we do as people. And so I want my work to be in touch with who I am currently and what's touching me and how I'm seeing things differently around me in the world. And so for me, that's really important. It's very important that my work continues to shift and grow and improve, and that it doesn't become stagnant. I find sometimes that I get bored of my own work. And so then I know when that happens that I need to kind of go deeper, maybe into a different avenue with my work, or sometimes that'll be starting a new series of work on a different theme, to study. Like for one time I did a series on trees, and that was really just for me to get my focus on trees, to look at their shapes, to look at the design of a painting that the subject matter is more about the tree. And so those are just different ways that I guess when I say my study that I'm focusing on, that's kind of what I'm trying to do in my own study of art. So there's a little bit mingled in there with studying the masters, or artists that I really admire, work that I love, but also combining that with my own observations in my surroundings, in nature. Plein air painting plays a huge role in that for me. Most of my work, well, I would say I don't know, maybe half of my work is plein air and half of it is in the studio. And I sometimes get into the rut where I think the plein air painting has to be a finished piece, a beautiful finished piece. But I learn so much more in my plein air time if I see it as an opportunity to study and an opportunity to learn. So when my work starts to feel boring or stagnant, I know it's because I haven't spent enough time recently out in nature, seeing how nature does it, seeing the colors that nature presents to me or the compositions that nature will give to me, because I get stuck in my own head and I start producing kind of my own ideas, which can be great too. But then I need to go back out and learn from that great teacher of nature, and see how she does it and see how it changes the way that I can come back in my studio, and try, just be brave and try something different, try something new in my compositions or in my subject matter. So, yeah.
It seems you're painting a picture there, Erin, of your faith, how important that is to you, your spirituality, the way you look at the universe, and in terms of the nature and the the big wide world and the big skies that you enjoy, and the music that accompanies you when you're in your zone.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a picture of all of those things now that make Erin Spencer the artist that she is.
I like this picture of me. It isn't always so romantic, right? But I guess even now I'm sitting in my studio as I'm talking with you, and I'm just looking around, and not everything in here is something I've created. There's paintings that I've got from other artists in here. And obviously just little snippets of things like my sketchbooks or Linda. It's a really satisfying feeling to feel that these things that are inside of me, and this is true, I think, for all of us as human beings, each of us are in a way a walking library of memories and experiences and thoughts. And I just think what a beautiful thing to be able to, I guess, record a little bit of that in the world for others to have access to. I think we live in a world that is full of consumerism. There's a lot of consuming that we all do, whether it's material consumerism or just consuming ideas, consuming images, consuming media, consuming all of it. And I think we all do that. We all have a lot of intake through the day. I know I do. I can be inundated with it at times. But I love the process of kind of turning that off, like turning off the faucet of all the input sometimes so that I can kind of process through those things and sift through them and decide what I think about it, what I feel about it, what I personally want to include in my life. And I don't always do that perfectly. I mean, there's times where I think we can get really overwhelmed with everything coming at us from all different sides. And it's hard for us to decide, what do we really want? What do I really want in my life? What do I really want to say? What do I really want to believe? And I think for me, the art is a way for me to do that, is to process that. And I think just other ways that I find to do that, are just really important to me. Because I need that. I need to slow down. I need to slow it down sometimes so that I can kind of sift through it. And I think what's so exciting about art that I get to produce, but also art that I get to see from others, not just paintings, but anything that people create. It's so exciting. It's an exciting thing to see. This came through the filter of this artist. This is their lens. This is how they've perceived something. And this is the mark that they've left behind about it. And I think that's really a beautiful thing, because we're all so connected. And that to me is one thing that I love about seeing original art, like in a gallery or in a museum. It's even more poignant because often that's artists who are no longer living. And you go in there and you look at this art and you just realize that this is an artifact from their lives, that this is something that was left behind by them, that they made their mark. This is the hand of the artist here. And I just think that's really neat, because there's a lot of people in the world that maybe don't feel that they're able to leave a mark behind about themselves. We all do, whether we know we're doing it or not. But it's just a tangible evidence of that, of a life that was lived and a journey that was taken. And I just think that's pretty exciting, I guess, to be a part of that and to be able to do that, hopefully, in a way. Maybe most of my work will end up in a landfill one day, but maybe some of it will survive.
In terms of what you find to be satisfying and the process that you enjoy, how would you describe where you feel the most satisfaction?
So I probably a couple of different ways. I think when I'm able to see kind of the full circle process of my work, from my own vision of it to building a panel to, creating this painting it, like envisioning it, then painting it, and then letting it sit, letting it dry, varnishing it, framing it, like the whole, like all of those little intricate steps that have to happen for every single piece, but then seeing the full kind of seeing it come full circle and seeing it in a show or on display. That's a pretty satisfying moment for me, when I know that my work was desired enough to kind of be presented, and then for someone to want to bring it home, I think is pretty exciting as well. So I was just out at a community college in Wyoming. They have the art director there. They're really interested in getting artists from around the country to come and display work for their students and for their community, and then teaching, doing a little class for the students as well. And so I was able to have about 20 pieces in their gallery space that they have at this school in this small town, this kind of smaller city in Wyoming. Well, maybe not so small for Wyoming, but maybe compared to other places, it's not like a booming metropolis, and it's not a big art center or anything like that. But I thought that was a really fulfilling experience for me, even though it wasn't a sales opportunity. It wasn't necessarily something I was going to put on my resume, and, some high-end gallery was going to look at that and say, wow, she was with that place, but I loved being there. I loved going out. It's a beautiful landscape in Wyoming. It's so open and vast. And then being able to walk into this gallery space, which was so beautiful, and to see my work all there together, and to know that someone wanted it there, that was pretty wonderful for me. And then to be able to meet these students that are themselves, aspiring artists, and to be able to teach some of them and work with them, I love that. I think that's a neat opportunity to be able to do something like that. and to feel that I'm at a place, I guess, in my career where I have those opportunities. I'm grateful for that. Those have been that's recently, that was a very fulfilling experience for me. So
That takes me to my next question. How you define success as an artist?
So I guess if I was going to think about this for myself, I guess as an artist, so for instance, if somebody wants to purchase a painting for me, it's always wonderful and it always feels so good. And that's exciting. But what's even sometimes more exciting is when an artist that I admire wants to buy a painting for me. That for me is very exciting because I think as artists, maybe we see things differently than those who are not themselves like deep in that creative artistic process. We see the mark making in a certain way. We see the nuance in a certain way. And so I think when an artist that I admire acquires a painting from me, that's exciting. That feels successful to me. Not necessarily even if they're just purchasing it, but commenting on it or giving some kind of a commentary on my work. That's pretty successful for me. I don't know. I think for me in the long term, I would hope that one day I hope to live very old and be able to look back at my life and to be able to, I think for me, if I was going to look back, I would hope that success for me as an artist would be that I lived a good life, that my art was a thread through it, and that I always continued to improve in it, that I always had the desire to not just get better at it, because I think that kind of naturally can come as we work at things, but that I always was willing to change and like try and be brave and courageous in my work and not shy away from any particular thing. Like if there's something that I really would love to be able to portray or would love to see in a painting, I want to feel like one day I could do that. So I guess that would be a mark of success for me. Yeah. And even now I think I feel successful when I'm working at it. When I'm just working at it, I guess, and not giving up on things, not stopping, I guess. So.
And then there's the teacher in you and the workshops that you give. That obviously brings you satisfaction to share your techniques, your skills, and the artist that you are. Talk a little bit about what's ahead this year, because I know you've got workshops, you've got shows. Where can people find your work, Erin?
Yeah, thank you. There's opportunities this year. So I'm teaching 2 plein air workshops here in Rhode Island. They're both full at the moment, but if anyone's listening and they wanted to reach out, I could think about that. So in June, I'll be teaching 2 plein air workshops here. That's all on my website as well for information that people might be looking for. And then I will hopefully do an online workshop this year. I did one last year. I'm hoping to do that in the fall. That's kind of nice because it can accommodate people from all over the world, So I've had people from Germany and England and different places participate in those online ones. And that will be information that I'll be putting out at some point as well. I also have 2 shows that I have a show here in Rhode Island, but it's opening this week. And so I don't know by the time the podcast comes out if it will the opening will be over, but it runs till June 17th, I believe. And that's going to be on my website as well. And then I'll have 2 shows out in Utah later in the fall, one in September and one in November, where I'll be traveling out there with a bunch of work to show. One is a 3-day show and one of them is a one night only show. So I've done them in the past and they've been really successful for me in terms of selling my work, but also just meeting other artists, being with other artists, meeting people who, patrons of the arts and things like that. So I think any of those kinds of opportunities have always been really, really good for me to do. It gets me out of my studio, out of my comfort zone a little bit, into the bigger, wider world, I guess. It's always a good thing. So.
And everything that you paint, and it's mostly oils, isn't it? And mostly landscapes.
Yes.
Do you market to sell, or are any pieces that they're like, I love this too much, I'm not going to sell it? Do you feel that at all?
No, so I'm trying to think if there aren't too many like that. There's one painting that I have in our home that I actually had started it. It was kind of a larger piece. And then we adopted our second son. And I remember thinking to myself, I need to put my painting stuff away again because I'm a little bit all or nothing in the way that I operate. And so I knew that if it was out, it was going to be really hard for me to not always be trying to paint. And so I decided to pack up all my paintings again. And I had that painting part finished. And I was at the stage of it where I was like, it's not done yet. But I decided to keep it that way. And then when I did get back to painting, I thought I could finish it. But I decided, no, I'm going to keep it unfinished. And I'll put it in our home. And it'll just be my reminder that my art is a really big part of my life. It's a big core pillar in who I am as a person, but it isn't all I am. And my children and my family are more important to me. And so I kind of keep it in my house as a reminder of that. And it's funny because I see it all the time and I don't love it the way that it is, but I love that it is the way that it is, if that makes sense. So I have that. I keep that one. And there's a few that I've kept over the years. Like I said, I spent a lot of time in the Netherlands, and some of my Dutch pieces that I've painted, I hold on to. I did this series of still life paintings of Dutch klompen, like the wooden shoes. So I collect them, and I did this big series where I would do kind of like an overhead view of a little Dutch shoe, and so I painted them. And I've kept some of those. I have like a Dutch wall in my house that I have bought a painting from another artist that did a master copy of a Vermeer, and I have that on that wall and things like that. So, and my first oil painting that I ever did, actually, I still have, and I never sold that painting. So it's the tulip fields in the Netherlands, and I have that. And a few others that are, my house is kind of a rotating gallery. So I hang things up in the house in a few different places. And then when the painting sells, I'll take it down and I'll put something else in its place, mostly to make room in my studio. But, and some of those don't sell for a long time, and they end up kind of sticking around long enough that I decide to keep them. I have 2 or 3 that are that way, that I've had other artists say that they like to keep pieces that feel like they're transitional paintings for them, like a painting that kind of jump-started them to a new place in their work. And I have a few that are that way for me, where I've held on to those because I felt like they kind of said something about a phase or a stage of art that I was in. And then I kept a piece like that. And then maybe as I move on to new things, then I'll keep another piece from another stage or something like that. But yeah, so I'm not consciously doing it all the time, but it's kind of happened a little bit that way. I usually just try to sell everything. If somebody wants it, I'm usually willing to let it go.
And the children, are they influenced by your art? Do they sneak into the studio with you?
They do sometimes. So my daughter probably the most at this point. She loves to paint, so she'll kind of do that sometimes with me. I try to be pretty laid back about artistic messes in our house. So I feel like that mentality has allowed my kids to be pretty free in their artistic, their attempts to be artistic as well, their desire to be artistic and create things. So I have just kind of this tablecloth that's always in the dining room, and they know if they want to do anything messy, they just put it down, and then they can get their stuff out. They know where to get everything. So that is nice. My middle son, he loves to draw. So he's really into drawing cartoons, and he's very good. He's always talking to me about trying a new thing, or he's like, oh, I want to learn hands. And so he'll focus on it and practice it. And so I'm impressed by that. He's way more advanced in his drawing skills than I ever was at his age. So maybe he's going somewhere with that. We'll see.
Well, obviously, we've taken up an hour of your time in the studio today, Erin, to do this. And I know you want to get back to painting because that's what you do and love, and you paint every day. So I want to thank you very much for just taking this time out of your schedule to talk to us.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
And you'll find a link in the show notes to Erin's social media and her website, but also her playlist when she's working, and a list of some of her favorite female artists who have inspired her. And whilst you're on social media, please do give us a follow and leave your comments and questions and suggestions for guests who you would like to hear from on our Instagram. That's the AART Podcast. That's art with 2 A's. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please do leave us a 5-star rating and review, because that helps others find the show. My guest next week will be LA-based artist and curator Christine Calabresi, so I hope you'll join me then.